Chapter 1, When Logic Betrays You, Part 1, The Perfect Calculation. It was a cold January morning in 1986, the kind of chill that makes metal rings sharper and rubber a little more brittle. Inside NASA's launch control room, the smartest people on the planet were armed with graphs, equations, and that most dangerous of weapons, confidence. The data said, go. The math said, safe. The O-rings said nothing, because O-rings don't talk. 73 seconds later, the Challenger did, briefly, before vanishing into a sky that suddenly looked like bad logic in smoke form. Nobody at NASA was stupid. They had logic, flowcharts, statistical margins, and committees. But logic, as it turns out, doesn't protect you from being wrong. It just lets you be wrong with precision and confidence. That's the paradox we're starting with. Logic isn't the opposite of error. It's often its most elegant disguise. When equations lie politely, logic has an impeccable resume. It built bridges, guided rockets, and helped you calculate the tip on a date while pretending you weren't doing math under the table. But logic has one fatal flaw. It believes what it's told. Feed it garbage, and it will produce gourmet nonsense. Give it flawed premises, and it'll make them sound like gospel. This is known in computer science as GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, and in human life as just another Tuesday. Think of logic as a loyal intern. It never questions the boss. It just formats stupidity in bullet points. If you tell it, the earth is flat, logic says, excellent, let's design the shipping routes. If you tell it, humans are rational, logic replies, perfect, we'll build an economy around that. And that, dear reader, is how entire civilizations end up with recessions, revolutions, and reality TV, because humans are anything but rational. The self-driving car that followed the rules too well. Fast forward to 2018. A self-driving Uber test car in Arizona ran over a pedestrian at night. The sensors saw her. The code registered her. The logic decided she didn't exist because she wasn't in a crosswalk zone. The algorithm didn't malfunction. It was being logical. The rules said pedestrians appear in designated areas. Therefore, this unidentified object must be a false positive. The problem wasn't emotion. It was an absence of it. A human driver, flawed, tired, and probably singing along badly to Queen, would have braked out of instinct. The machine, in its flawless logic, stayed calm and committed murder by spreadsheet. That's the difference between logic and reason. Logic follows rules. Reason asks whether the rules still make sense. Your brain's IT department. The human brain is a data center run by two departments that don't get along: emotion operations and logic support. Emotion ops works 24/7, fueled by caffeine, fear, and childhood trauma. Logic support only shows up after lunch, asks for clearer tickets, and insists everything must go through the process. When something goes wrong, emotion ops panics. Logic support opens a new spreadsheet. By the time they agree on what to do, you've already yelled at your spouse, eaten an entire bag of chips, and written a heartfelt apology email that begins, per my last email. Logic, bless its heart, believes it can fix anything with a flowchart. Emotion knows flowcharts burn nicely. The bureaucrat's paradox. If logic had a national religion, it would be bureaucracy. In 2001, a French hospital patient died because paramedics followed procedure instead of common sense. They arrived, checked the form. Is the patient conscious? No. Is the patient breathing? Yes. Transport immediately? No, because the box for doctor signature was blank. They waited for the signature. The patient didn't. This is what I call the bureaucrat's paradox. It's logical to do something illogical if the form requires it. Entire empires have run on that principle. Rome fell not to barbarians, but to paperwork. The Soviet Union collapsed under the weight of triplicate forms. And if you've ever tried to cancel your cable service or gym membership, you felt the same slow death by paperwork. Schrodinger's spreadsheet. You've seen it before. The corporate PowerPoint that explains nothing with 48 charts. Each chart tells a story. None agree. It's not misinformation. It's data in quantum superposition. In 2008, Lehman Brothers' balance sheets looked mathematically sound. So did Enron's in 2001. The accountants weren't lying. They were logically correct within assumptions so creative they belonged in fiction. A spreadsheet can be perfectly logical while completely detached from reality, like a lawyer arguing that drowning is impossible because the contract didn't mention water. Logic doesn't ask, does this make sense? It asks, is this consistent? Consistency is not truth. It's just organized delusion. The poker player's fallacy. Meet Rational Ron. Ron is a professional poker player with a master's in statistics and the emotional range of a calculator. He runs simulations. He memorizes probabilities. He folds when the math says fold. And somehow, he keeps losing to gut-feeling Gina, who wears sunglasses indoors and chews her lucky straw. Ron can't comprehend it. Statistically, he says, she's making suboptimal decisions. Yes, but she's playing humans. Ron's playing numbers. Logic calculates expected value. Emotion reads micro-expressions, posture, hesitation. Gina notices Ron's left eyebrow twitch when he bluffs. That's not mysticism. It's data her logic department doesn't have clearance to access. Logic may know the odds, but emotion knows the game. The comfort of certainty. Why do we love logic even when it fails us? Because it feels safe. Logic is the adult in the room, the one who says, let's be rational, right before everything explodes. Emotion is messy, unpredictable, and occasionally cries in public. Logic wears a tie, uses a whiteboard, and says, we'll revisit that next quarter. It offers certainty, and certainty is a hell of a drug. The problem? Certainty doesn't care if it's right. As long as it feels confident, it'll sell you snake oil in a lab coat. That's why conspiracy theories and economic bubbles follow identical curves, rising confidence without rising evidence. It's why overconfident executives announce mergers that make sense only on a napkin, the philosopher and the fire alarm. There's a famous experiment where people sat in a room filling out surveys while smoke began to pour from a vent. Those sitting alone almost always got up to report it. Those sitting with others stayed put because nobody else moved, and it seemed reasonable to assume everything was fine. Logic performed flawlessly. If no one else is alarmed, there's no danger. Emotion whispered, something's wrong. Logic replied, don't be dramatic. The room filled with smoke. When interviewed later, participants said, I didn't want to overreact. Translation, logic talked emotion out of saving my life. The seduction of flowcharts. In 1959, IBM's marketing department released a brochure titled Simplify Your Thinking with Flowcharts. By 1960, every mid-level manager had a wall chart of boxes and arrows explaining how to think. Flowcharts are catnip for the logical mind. Clean, linear, and delusionally confident that life follows decision trees. Unfortunately, real life is more like spaghetti code. There are loops, exceptions, recursive arguments, and that one cousin who insists on playing devil's advocate at Thanksgiving. You can't flowchart feelings. You can't spreadsheet morality. And yet, we try. Every self-help app that calculates happiness scores is the spiritual descendant of that IBM brochure. the house of assumptions. Every logical argument stands on a foundation of assumptions, and most of ours are built on quicksand. Economists assume humans act in their best interest. Politicians assume voters read policy papers. Tech companies assume algorithms are neutral. You assume reading this book will make you smarter. Debatable. When those assumptions fail, logic collapses spectacularly, like a Jenga tower built on ego. The more complex the system, the more invisible the assumptions become. And the more invisible they are, the more certain we feel. That's the irony. The less we know, the more convinced we are that logic has our back. The historian's hall of logical horrors. History's worst ideas didn't start with madness. They started with logic. Colonialism? Logical, they said. We're bringing civilization to savages. Eugenics? Logical, they said. Improve the species by eliminating defects. The Inquisition? Logical, they said. Burning you alive is how we save your soul. Logic isn't moral. It's obedient. It'll rationalize genocide as easily as geometry. Take eugenics, for instance. Early 20th century scientists genuinely believed they were being objective. They had charts, graphs, and cranium calipers. Francis Galton, Darwin's cousin, pioneered the term eugenics to describe improving humanity through selective breeding. The logic was impeccable. Step 1. Society suffers because of defective individuals. Step 2. Remove the defects. Step 3. Society improves. It even sounded scientific until you notice step 1 was written by people who thought poverty was genetic and compassion was a distraction. Logic will always serve whoever writes the premises, and history is the burned-down lab of humanity's reasonable experiments. The cult of the rational genius. We've built a cultural altar to rational geniuses. Elon Musk tweets equations, Sam Bankman-Fried cited utilitarian ethics, and somewhere a TED Talk is happening on how to make smarter decisions using data. But here's the punchline. The smarter someone is, the better they are at rationalizing nonsense. Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger proved it. People who are bad at something overestimate their skill. But there's a sequel nobody talks about. Smart people overestimate their objectivity. Intelligence doesn't immunize you against bias. It just gives you a fancier vocabulary to defend it. The great irony of reason is that it rewards ego. When you've built your identity around being logical, admitting error feels like heresy. And that's how rational geniuses build rockets that explode, markets that collapse, and empires that rot behind PowerPoint presentations. The data delusion. In 2020, Facebook's machine learning team discovered that their algorithm, designed to optimize engagement, had logically concluded the best way to do that was to make people angry. Nothing increases engagement like outrage. The code wasn't evil. It was efficient. Its logic was brutally clean. Engagement equals profit. Anger drives engagement. Therefore, anger equals profit. And just like that, civilization got optimized into a perpetual argument. Logic doesn't care about consequences. It cares about outcomes.